If you were trapped inside this building fire, would you want a progressive RIT team to come get you or a reactionary RIT team? Let's find out. Welcome to the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team concept. I like to use think tank practicals. I want to get you thinking right off the bat. In this first photo, what do you see for hazards on side A and side B? The reality is the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team firefighter has to be a forward-thinking firefighter that's going to look for and predict the problems that are going to occur before they happen. So make a note of what you see on side A and side B. I'm not going to give you the answer right now, but at the end, we'll talk through and see if we can learn something from each other. All right, on side C, what are you seeing? We got some firefighters that are in operation. There's an operational mode of offensive attack, as we can see. I want you to point out the things that you're concerned with. All right, in the close-up view, what are you catching? What are you seeing, fellas? And on the fourth side of your 360, as a rapid intervention team, what are you catching on side D? All right, so learning to read these slides that we just looked at, it's going to take a progressive thinking firefighter in the rapid intervention team mode with a good mindset on forward thinking, predictability, and a safety officer-like mentality. So looking at mindset, let's look at routine fires. I hear firefighters all the time talk about, it's just a routine fire. What is a routine fire? Every fire is different. Every fire has a different building construction. Every fire has a different fuel load. We have so many complex factors that need to be factored in on what is a fire and what is a routine fire that we can't have that mindset. All right, the next step of mindset, failure to properly read the structure. How many times have you looked out into the street and saw the rapid intervention team leaning against the bumper of the truck, upset because they're actually not doing anything with their hands? The reality is the progressive thinking rapid intervention team member, he's going to want to do a 360. He's going to want to properly read the structure. What's the construction? What's the age? What's the integrity? What's the maintenance of that building? All right, to failure to read smoke and failure to read fire conditions is the next step in having a progressive thinking mindset. Remember on that slide on side C, I gave you a close-up of the side C second floor window. What did you see? Were you able to read the smoke? Were you able to read the fire conditions? What type of environment were those firefighters going into? All right, the next step in mindset, forward thinking, is poor fireground communications. How many times have we seen firefighters get into a bad situation, caught in a bad place, and listen to the radio communications that happen on that scene? Poor fireground communications is cited almost every time a firefighter gets hurt or killed. And one of the most critical that we find with the lack of a mindset that's progressive is the lack of fireground accountability. It's also one of those factors that are cited all the time in NIOSH reports when firefighters are lost, hurt, or killed. So in summary, on mindset, firefighters need to make sure that they don't get caught in task fixation. We are all hands-on learners, we're hands-on doers, and sometimes what we're doing with our hands will overrun our rational thinking. Also on the fireground, because of the stressful environment that we work in, stress-induced overload has a factor in mindset as well. We need to take a lesson from our law enforcement brothers and sisters. You see, 20 years ago, they learned about stress inoculation, the ability to provide stress under training environments so that when they encountered stress in the real-world environment, they were able to wade through that stress and come up with rational thinking. All right, so let's look at some common trends in the industry. Progressive thinking rapid intervention team members need to know the common trends. What are some of the things that firefighters are trending in and getting in trouble with? Oftentimes I'm looking at reports and I'm seeing Scba malfunctions, Scba out of air situations, lost, trapped, or disoriented firefighters. How about the cardiac-related emergencies that happen on the fireground? And commonly, we start to see individuals who do get in trouble, and we start to look at their training and their past history and experience, they had no self-rescue survival techniques. All right, so let's look at Scba malfunctions. Does your firefighters understand all of the performance features of the self-contained breathing apparatus? Do they understand how air flows through that air pack Do they understand their redundancy systems, their primary bypass and their secondary bypass for emergency procedures? Those are all very important when we start to break down and deal with these common trends. You see, these Scba malfunctions aren't only a common problem in volunteer fire departments. I see it quite oftentimes in big city paid departments as well, that individuals who have worn the same type of air pack for many, many, many years still don't understand how the air flows through it and all the features and emergency features of said air pack as well. So looking at common trends under lost, trapped, or the disoriented firefighter, do firefighters understand when to call a Mayday? Will they call it early enough? We should have a policy and procedure on that. We should have a list of individual things that happen to you that drive you to automatically declare a Mayday and provide the lunar information. Here's the training nugget for Scba malfunctions, out of air, or lost, trapped, or the disoriented firefighter. For $0, zero impact to your training budget, the next time that you're doing Scba training, instead of just covering them up so that they can't see and providing a claustrophobia training, put them in a situation where they're searching from a line. They're moving through a building, and at some point, they're going to get lost, trapped, or disoriented. The easiest way to do that is to provide a mattress that someone is discarding and provide that inside the firehouse. Drop it on top of them and then lean on top of it. Force the firefighter to find their radio and call a Mayday while they're trapped underneath something. You see, just simply sitting around the kitchen table and providing a radio report on the lunar information, location, name, assignment, resources needed, there's no stress involved. Introduce stress inoculation by providing some stressors, controlled environment that the firefighter has to work through to provide that lunar information. How can we effectively introduce a way to stop cardiac-related emergencies? Let's talk and think about this for a second. Policies and procedures. Are we doing annual physicals? Are we meeting NFPA 1500? Are we actually doing health and wellness? I know it's hard to do, and it's got a huge budgetary crunch, and individual departments don't have the money to send people for those physicals, but it's something that we as an industry have to look at. But on the fireground, as a rapid intervention team, a progressive thinking rapid intervention team, if I know that 60% of my emergencies on the fireground are going to be cardiac related, one of the most important tools that I should have staged on my tarp is an automatic external defibrillator. You see, when a firefighter drops in the street or collapses inside a building, it's the rapid intervention team's job to pull them out. But if a firefighter drops on the lawn, you know the rapid intervention team is going to go over there and deal with it because that's what they're waiting for. They're waiting for firefighter emergencies. One of the worst things that I've ever seen is a firefighter that was down and in cardiac arrest and they couldn't find an automatic external defibrillator. The last common trend that we're seeing is no self-rescue or firefighter survival training. Let's look at this for a second. Rapid intervention training is about moves, drags, and carries. But the reality is those moves, drags, and carries are basic firefighter skill sets. When we get in trouble, our partner needs to be able to assist us and seek refuge to a safe place while the rapid intervention team is coming to help. All right, let's look at some factors that cause some of the trouble with firefighters getting into trouble. Rapid fire increases are on the rise. Metabolic stress, the modern lightweight constructed home, and the early building collapse associated with such. So rapid fire increases are on the rise. Why is that? Well, let's look at the furnishings. The polymers, synthetics, and plastics that are associated with all the furnishings that are in a modern home today burn at an extremely high rate of speed, and they travel and they spread to the next room at an alarming rate. All right, so let's look at the metabolic stress. We just talked about rapid fire increases and the thermal insult associated with the synthetics, polymers, and plastics. We are encapsulating firefighters with some of the best gear at this time in the industry ever seen before. The metabolic stress is a consideration because firefighters are getting inside buildings deeper and the buildings are hotter and the internal organs of our body are starting to get metabolic stress disorders. Let's look at the lightweight constructed home. They're built fast, quick, and they're super light. They stand up pretty well. But under fire conditions, we all understand that they fall down really fast. And we're starting to see early building collapses. Why is that? Well, this modern lightweight constructed home, it's super lightweight and it's kiln dried. It's a lumberyard standing upright. And when fire gets in those void spaces, it takes the actual structure's integrity out so quickly that we're starting to see building collapses as quick as 8 minutes. All right, so here's some nuggets for the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team member. We got to have solid RIT procedures. We got to develop self-rescue skills for everybody in our fire department. We got to provide rapid intervention training for those members that are going to be part of the rapid intervention team. We also got to have a strong RIT presence on the fire ground. And lastly, empower your rapid intervention team to intervene and stop unsafe acts before they cause injury or firefighter death. All right, so here's what a good, solid rapid intervention training program looks like. We got to cover PPE, SCBA, and air management drills. We got to have a good understanding of what we're wearing on our back and what the limitations of those are. Interior benchmarking and situational awareness, the art of go and no-go and determining those conditions inside a building. How about advanced searches using thermal imager cameras? Firefighters have a good understanding how they turn on and off, but they don't understand how to interpret the actual image. How about firefighter down? Moves, drags, and carries. These are basic functions of firefighter skills, but we need to practice them all the time and keep people ready. How about up and down stairs? Firefighters that are caught downstairs, we need to extricate them up. Or vice versa, moving them down from upper floors to lower floors. How about extrication through a firefighter through the floor? That's pretty important when we have a collapse and a firefighter drops into the basement. What are the techniques to get them out of that hole and back to safety? Firefighters seeking refuge, kind of a safety and survival skill set, but reality is sometimes we have to seek refuge while waiting for the rapid intervention team. Last resort, firefighters jumping out of windows, the window bailout. Do we have a rope? Do we have a harness? Do we have a ladder? Or do we have a fire hose that we can slide? How about the rapid intervention team pack? The SCBA transfill operation of transfilling air from the RIT bag to the firefighter's bottle that's on his back. We got to have standard operating procedures and guidelines. We must review them on an annual basis. We also need to have a good, solid, scenario-based Mayday operation training drill. Without one, we'll never be able to test and see if our skill set matches the real world. And last but not least, understanding how to control and manage a Mayday. We got to train the incident commanders that are in the street so that they have a better understanding on what we need on the inside of the building. Now, I know this list looks overwhelming, and some of you might be looking at the list going, wow, we're just a small fire department in a small little community. How can I get all this done? Well, the reality is a lot of these skill sets are basic firefighter functions. So if you meet once a month or twice a month and you dedicate a couple hours of time annually each month on a specific subject, out of what's listed on this list, you'll be able to cover all of that in a 12-month period. All right, so let's look at some operational procedures now. RIT staging. Where are you staging the rapid intervention team? Some places have them staged out in the street and they're leaning against the bumper of the fire engine, and others have them staged right at the entrance or the access point. I like to teach when I'm traveling around that the rapid intervention team needs to be at a close proximity to the main access and egress point. They need to stage their tools and equipment on a tarp that's dedicated to them, that no one's going to take and steal their tools for regular operations. So now let's look on a multi-story building where we're going to stage RIT. If I've got a fire on the 4th floor of an apartment building, I surely hope that the rapid intervention team's not leaning against the bumper outside, or they're not even staged outside the front door. I need them one floor below the fire. They're staged the floor below, operationally ready to go on a multi-high-rise building so that they can actually go upstairs and make a difference in a short amount of time. If I stage them out in the street, they got to hike up there. By the time they get there, the firefighter that's in trouble is going to be out of air. And remember, it's rapid intervention team, not the slow intervention team. Operationally, how many firefighters do we need for the rapid intervention team? Let's look at that real quick. Some places have 2 because they're 2 in, 2 out requirement for federal standards. Some places will use 3, an officer and 2 firefighters. When I teach rapid intervention training and the operational procedures thereof, I like to use 4 firefighters for the rapid intervention team. My justification for the 4-person team approach of rapid intervention teams is simple. An officer on that line, the RIT officer, he needs to communicate, coordinate, and calculate. His job is to assess the situation, determine the conditions of go and no-go and account for the firefighters that he's working with. The lead search firefighter is light and fast. He's got an axe and a Halligan, he's got the irons with him, and he's searching along the way. The second firefighter on the search team is going to be the rapid intervention bag firefighter. You're going to enter the building with a bag that has an SCBA cylinder, and your job when we find the firefighter is to transfill air, connect air, and extend that firefighter's life. The third firefighter, who's running tail, he's the caboose. That bag is the rope bag. He's going to connect the rope to the outside of the building, and as they advance in, riding caboose, he's going to pay out rope. That's their lifeline. That's their way to find from point A to point B. And when things go bad, that firefighter is going to turn around and everyone is going to follow him back out to safety. So in conclusion, a 4-firefighter team concept is important. The officer, his job is to communicate, coordinate, and calculate. He's going to keep track of his 3 firefighters. The search firefighter in the front is going to search along the way. The second firefighter, they're bringing air. And the third firefighter is paying out the life safety rope that's going to keep them safe from point A to point B. If I am running a 3-man team, that means the officer has to run one of those 3 functions in the team. What's going to happen is they're going to lose their ability to think and not be tied up in task-oriented skills. Okay, so a 3-man team is less productive than a 4-man team. All right, so how are we identifying your rapid intervention team? For many, many years, we've just staged a group of firefighters over on the side and said, yeah, that's our safety team. That's the rapid intervention team. But the reality is, progressive rapid intervention teams need to be identified. The benefit of identifying the rapid intervention team, as seen in the photo supplied here, is that everyone on the fireground will be able to actually look over really quick and say, oh, those are just the rapid intervention team guys. The reality is, when I identify them, everyone on the fireground knows that what their job is supposed to be is a safety team. If you empower them by policy and procedure to stage their tools and equipment and start to prepare to be ready for operation, that is a wonderful thing. What the reality is most teams will stage and stop right there. The progressive rapid intervention team should be empowered to do a 360 of the building. And when they do, they can actually size up the building from all 4 sides, like we talked about at the very beginning of this program. The importance of a size up has never been more critical with all the factors that we talked about previously. If your administration will empower the rapid intervention team by policy and procedure to act like a safety officer on the fireground, we can increase our safety margin from 1 safety officer to 5. And what I mean by that is if I empower the rapid intervention team to intervene when they see an unsafe act, and everyone on the fireground knows that the rapid intervention team has that power, everyone on the fireground is going to work under a better, safer environment. All right, so let's look at some rapid intervention team size-up considerations. When we do a 360 and we're starting to size up the building on our arrival, we want to look at building construction. Where's the fire? Where and how many firefighters are operating inside that building? What is the secondary means of egress profile? What are the immediate life safety hazards? And should I report those hazards to the incident commander? So let's look at building construction. When I'm doing a 360 of a building as the rapid intervention team, I'm not task-oriented. That means that I'm going to slow down. I'm going to have a methodical movement around the building, and I'm going to look at the hazards associated with building construction. What type of construction is it? How old is it? What is its condition? Is there been deterioration from lack of maintenance? When I look at where's the fire, when I'm doing a good, slow, methodical 360, I can actually look and find where the fire is by looking at all 4 sides. The importance of where to locate the fire is what are the dangers associated with firefighters working above or potentially below the fire. Now let's look at where and how many firefighters are operating inside the building. It's important to understand as a rapid intervention team member how many people are operating inside the building at any given time. If I don't, I'm actually going to have a problem when I have to go to work. Because if I previously knew on the last par check that there was 15 firefighters operating on the second floor and a collapse happens of the roof, I'm going to have a good understanding that I'm going to have at least 15 firefighters in trouble. Locating the immediate safety hazards. This is a huge one. It's not just building related. Is there gas? Is there propane? What are the hazards associated with access and egress? Do we have secondary means of egress? Do we have ladders up on all four sides? Do we have ladders up on every window? Nothing worse than to look in the street and see a bunch of ladders that are still on the sides of fire engines, and I see windows on the buildings that don't have ladders planted next to them. And lastly, after you complete your 360, the Rapid Intervention Team officer should report to the command post. The rest of those members should report back to the staging area where they're staged on that tarp. A one-on-one conversation between the Rapid Intervention officer and the incident commander should occur. He should parlay the information that they just saw on their nice, slow, methodical 360. The incident commander can then assess their resources and figure out, do I have anybody on the scene that can actually make a difference in fixing some of the problems that Rapid Intervention Team has located? All right, and the last part of RIT Size Up is it needs to be continuous monitoring. What I mean by that is every time dispatch notifies command that it's time to do another PAR, either at the 15 or the 20-minute mark, that's a good indicator that the Rapid Intervention Team should do another 360. If they do that every time there's a PAR, they will have benchmarks to see as conditions get better or they get worse. I know it seems like a lot of information for the Rapid Intervention Team to keep track of, but the importance of this information has never been more critical for firefighter safety. A lot of departments are using a dry erase board or a Rapid Intervention cheat sheet with all these indicators and factors on there that they can just check the boxes. Don't be afraid to reach out to neighboring communities that do and have a solid rapid intervention program and ask them what they're using. And here's a great example of a rapid intervention progressive thinking command board. Over here on the left, it lists out building construction types. It lists out hazards. It makes the RIT officer's job so much easier when they have a little task-oriented checkbox to keep them on track. In this single-story ranch residential fire, you've been assigned the Rapid Intervention Team assignment. What are some of the considerations that you would have while doing your 360 size up? Granted, we're looking at side A, but what I see in this photo is a single-story ranch with a residential fire. I've got a good smoke condition pushing from the eaves. I need to know the building construction. What's the age and type? Was this house built in the 30s? Was it built in the 50s? Or was it built in the 1980s? Type 5 wood frame construction has all different building types and construction associated with the age. Is it balloon frame or not? Is this house on a slab, a sub-basement, or a full basement? Do I have secondary means of access to the basement? Do I have a bulkhead? Do I have a walkout in the backyard? What are some of the associated concerns I have with the windows? What's the smoke profile? What's the fire conditions? What's the fire load? Those are some of the things that pop into my mind. Another consideration in the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team concept is making sure that we train the incident commanders on how to manage a Mayday. You see, I travel all over the country teaching classes, and one of the things that I find is we do a really good job training firefighters with moves, drags, and carries, all the skill set to rescue one of our own. But oftentimes what I find, a liability is that the incident commanders who do fires and they run incident command and they do the ICS system really well haven't been trained on how to handle managing the Mayday. So what I've provided for you here is a checklist for Mayday management for incident commanders. It's a flow chart on how to handle how things should happen and keep you on task. You see, when incident commanders aren't trained on how to handle a Mayday, they're going to fall back on leadership from emotion, their gut feeling, and they're going to focus on rescuing one of our own. But what's going to happen is the rest of the fire, the discipline, and all the other tasks associated with continuing to manage the fire are going to suffer. So it's important to make sure that our incident commanders understand that we need a good, solid understanding with a policy and procedure and a checklist on how to manage a Mayday. If you're an incident commander and you're sitting here watching this video saying to yourself, I've never seen anything for managing a Mayday for incident commanders, that should be a red flag that we need to be a student for life. You see, just because we traveled up the ranks and we've made it to the top, it doesn't necessarily mean that we stop learning. It's important to make sure that incident commanders are trained in their skill set just as much as the firefighter skill set for moves, drags, and carries. All right, so let's look at some personal safety equipment that we can provide our firefighters to make sure that they operate safely on the fire ground. Are we providing everybody with a PSS? A personal safety system that they can bail out of a window when they get caught trapped above the fire? How about something as simple as these markers that you see in this photo, showing the direction and travel of the way out? You see, firefighters can be taught how to touch the couplings and figure out which way it is to the truck and which way it is to the nozzle, but in a high heat, high stress environment, the concept of rational thinking might not be there. Industry has provided us with the ability to have reflective arrows that point to the way out of the building in a rapid, non-rational thinking manner. So let's talk about some progressive RIT operations. What makes a progressive rapid intervention team concept work? I've provided you with a bunch of photos here that we're going to talk through and discuss what makes progressive RIT operations make sense. All right, so let's look at the roof. Look how many firefighters are on the roof of this building fire. If I'm the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team officer and we're doing a 360 and I've been empowered by policy or procedure to stop unsafe acts, I could prevent potentially these firefighters from falling through the roof. We all understand that roofs are under fire and they're starting to deteriorate when there's a building fire, and we need to understand and limit our exposures. Being on the roof sometimes can be a dangerous place. If we've adopted a progressive RIT operation program where the RIT officer is empowered to stop this unsafe act, we could probably prevent 6 or 8 firefighters from getting hurt in this one photo. But if we have a reactionary RIT program where the RIT team isn't empowered to do that, we're going to see firefighters get hurt or killed in a larger number. In this next photo, the progressive RIT operation officer sees an aerial ladder in operation. We've got a large structure and the aerial ladder is in contact with the electrical wires. Large structures create some unique hazards for the incident commander, especially if you only have one safety officer. Large buildings, it's very difficult to get a look at all 4 sides. These might be on 2 different streets, 2 different operations on one building. If I've got a progressive RIT program that empowers the officers to stop unsafe acts, I potentially could prevent this from becoming a firefighter injury. All right, in this photo, I've got a good fire coming from the roof line of a Type 3 ordinary constructed building. Type 3 ordinary constructed buildings are oftentimes our Main Street fires. When we start thinking about Main Street, even in the smallest little community, Main Streets oftentimes have buildings that touch each other, so it's very difficult to do a 360 unless you're either going up an alleyway or a road that actually travels on the reverse side, on the back side of side C. The reality is, the progressive RIT operation officer who's empowered to report conditions of unsafe acts, he might be able to report to command that on side C in the rear, I've got heavy fire coming through the roof. When the incident commander who's out front on side A actually only sees the smoke condition that's coming over the top. All right, in this last photo, I've got fire coming off of a 2.5-story wood frame building, and it's coming off the roof line. If you look at this age and construction type, it's most likely a balloon frame constructed home. A progressive RIT officer that actually identifies this might have the time through a methodical 360 to determine that we actually have a basement fire and we have crews that are operating on the first floor above the seat of the fire. Remember, progressive RIT operations is all about good communication and good coordination. Progressive RIT operations identifies problems, traps those acts, and mitigates them before they become injuries or death. It's all about sharing the knowledge and information to the incident commander. And if your department hasn't adopted the progressive RIT operation, your reactionary firefighters that are staged either out in the street or leaning against the bumper, they're not going to intervene and stop some of these acts from happening. That's terrible for firefighter safety. Let's think about this for a second. Let's learn from our law enforcement brothers. Cops and firefighters are always looking for work. Why would I want to put firefighters out in the street with idle hands, which causes complacency because firefighters are in the business of helping people? A progressive RIT operation and a progressive RIT program empowers them to stay busy, stay active, be doing 360s, be part of the scene, be part of the team. And it beats the hell out of them just sitting on their hands back at the truck. Progressive RIT operations is all about getting stuff done. The reality is, when you do your good 360 and you report back to the command post that there's no ground ladders on sides B and C for secondary means of egress, if the incident commander is just tapped out and he has no manpower or resources to handle that problem, he's waiting for more incoming companies, the progressive RIT officer can actually have his team intervene and throw ground ladders. They can stay active, they can stay busy for a greater safety margin. If I'm the progressive RIT officer and I'm doing 360s on a regular basis, I'm sizing up the building at all times. Check out here in this photo, I got a firefighter who's in trouble and they're actually reaching out for help through an open window. We note the lack of a ground ladder there, so the rapid intervention team's going to intervene immediately. They've got tools and equipment staged at their ready, close to the access point of this door. Progressive rapid intervention team operations is all about getting the job done, as needed, when needed. We need to stay progressive. We need to be forward-thinking and looking forward. Throwing ground ladders is an easy function that any firefighter can do on the fire ground. Make sure that you have those rapid intervention guys that are staged. Make sure you put them to work. Make sure you can reduce your liabilities. Because some of the common problems that we have in the fire service is all about secondary means of egress. And we work in an environment where oftentimes we don't have enough resources at the very beginning of an incident to commit to filling out all these functions. If we're going to fill the rapid intervention function, we need to empower that rapid intervention team to also be progressive and actually working on the fire ground. And if I can get the progressive rapid intervention team to throw ground ladders, I can prevent firefighters from bailing out of windows. All right, let's look at the progressive mindset of rapid intervention team concept, where we throw ground ladders at all levels and at all windows. This is a great example of that. The progressive rapid intervention team concept is all about staying ahead of the curve, trying to find all the what ifs, determining the liabilities. Now, the rapid intervention team officer, if he's using a thermal imager, it's going to increase his ability to see in all different conditions. For example, in these two photos of a garage fire, some of the hazards associated with that is operating within the garage, the cars, fuels, lawnmowers, propane tanks, gas grills. The list is endless. But the reality is, if we step inside without doing a good search and a good size up before we step inside, the challenges that we're going to face is that garage door and the springs failing, and we have a collapse on top of the crew. The thermal imager can size that up and let you see through all that smoke. And I know that I'm talking a lot about ground ladders in the progressive mindset of rapid intervention team concept, but the reality is a lot of places just don't throw enough of them. Another great example is this photo. Ground ladder to the roof with a crew working on top of the roof. We also have ground ladders to the secondary means of egress of the second floor. If the roof collapses and firefighters fall in, they have an access point out of that window, or we have access in to rescue them from the rapid intervention team. It's a great picture to look at for progressiveness of ground ladders. The thermal imaging camera is going to provide you with the ability to see again, remember, through the smoke, heat, and gases. We need to identify what the construction is of the building that we're operating in. If RIT team goes to work, they have to have a solid understanding of the environment they're working in. That includes building construction, because we all know that lightweight building construction can fall down at a rapidly alarming rate. In this photo here, I'm showing you lightweight construction with gusset plates. Thermal imaging cameras will identify those gusset plates and show you which ones are harder than the other ones. The tool with the camera is the nugget of the day. Take a quick look at this photo. This photo that I got for you here, lightweight truss, no nails, no gusset plates. The previous slide and photo that I showed you had gusset plates, and the camera can show you the metal gusset plate versus the wood. In this photo, no nail, no gusset plates needs to be identified, because in a large building with 20 and 30 foot ceilings, we don't want to be underneath them, nor do we want to be on top of them for an operation. So I know some of you are probably thinking, if I can't work on top of it and I can't be underneath it, then why should I be there at all? The reality is, sometimes firefighters get into places that they shouldn't be and they get in trouble. We, as a progressive RIT officer need to know that this camera will provide us with the ability to see. We're going to look at what the construction is. We're going to look at what the thermal insult is. Do we have high heat or high flame condition that's insulting the integrity of the structure of this building? If we do, we might have to make a determination under risk versus gain. Do we go or not go? All right, so let's look at some extended rapid intervention team assessment timelines. We all understand that the longer an incident goes on, the more threat and the more deterioration to the actual structure. Rapid intervention teams cannot become complacent just after an incident commander declares it under control. The building itself might have actually suffered enough threat that it's going to collapse. What is my collapse hazards? What is my collapse distances? And where are the locations of everyone that's working outside the building? The rapid intervention team officer needs to stay on his or her toes throughout the entire incident. All right, let's look back at Think Tank Practical number 1. We started this program with 4 sides of a building, and I asked you to identify some of the hazards associated with. My goal here is that while we work through these, you're going to see some of the same things that I'm going to list off, and we learned a lot of information over the last hour. All right, I'm looking at the AB corner of a 1.5-story wood frame single-family home with heavy fire on the front porch. I've got a great fire load going there. You can tell by the amount of fire that's coming out of multiple windows that the front of this house is heavily involved. I'm looking at a couple firefighters that have stretched a line to the B side of the building on the exterior. What is their mode of function? What's their operation? What are they going to do with that line? When I look at this porch that's got heavy fire coming from multiple windows, I need to look at the fire dynamics. Where is this fire going to travel? And where am I going to predict my next problem is going to be? Is this a self-contained porch with a full-size walk-in door into the main house, or is this porch part of the living space? If it is, then fire behavior and travel is already spread throughout the entire first floor. So I've got a 1.5-story wood frame home on a foundation. I've got some boarded up windows for the basement casement windows. I don't know a bulkhead or a walkout basement. So I've got a potential collapse hazard. I also have a living space or a potential space below the first floor. In this one photo of side C, I see multiple lines out. I see crews that are going up a ladder to make either venting an option on the second floor, but they're taking a line up. So that's telling me operationally that they're going to take and make entry into the second floor over that ground ladder. The other lines that I see on the ground show that I got a crew that's committed to the first floor. So as a rapid intervention officer, I understand now that I've got a crew on the first floor. I potentially are going to have a crew on the second floor. And I also have an exterior crew that's doing something on the side AB corner that potentially could change the fire dynamics of this situation. The challenges associated with making entry on the second floor are kind of unique. With this small little awning over the top of the first floor door, I can't make access to the second window on the second floor very easily. That means that they're making entry over a ground ladder that's pretty much going to be their one way in, one way out. On the opposite end of the building, on the side A side, I've got such heavy fire on the side A side that the windows on the side A side are actually covered in fire. That means that I've got firefighters that are going to make entry on the second floor with one way in and one way out. There's no secondary means of egress. All right, in this close-up photo of side C, let's look at the smoke that's coming out of the window. The firefighter that's kneeling down that cleaned out that window, they're actually trying to stay low because the heat, smoke, and gases that have come out of that second floor space is pretty significant. Let's look at the smoke itself. What's the color? The color is light brown, kind of chocolatey. Light brown smoke is an indicator of clean wood. That's telling me that the fire from side A has traveled in to the roof structure underneath the layment, underneath the tar and paper and the shingles that are on the roof. That means that there's fire in that little space above the living space of the second floor. That's telling me as firefighters make entry, I also have fire directly above me. Let's look at the volume. We've got a significant amount of volume that's coming out of this second floor window. When I have smoke that comes out from the sill all the way to the header of a window, that tells me that the cubic feet of smoke that's inside this room is pretty significant. It doesn't lift. If it lifts, then that tells me that the volume of smoke inside that room lifts to the height of smoke that's exiting the window. And velocity. The velocity that's coming out of this window is quite significant too. All these indicators tell me with color, volume, and velocity that this second floor is quickly going to escalate to a rapid fire increase. All right, so let's look at side D. I'm doing my 360. I'm the rapid intervention officer, and I'm providing a size up. When I get to side D, I've got 2 firefighters that are on a ground ladder that are trying to provide roof ventilation. What kind of safety hazards do we see here? I've got a hazard with the ladder itself and no one footing it. I've got 2 firefighters on a roof that's not really that stable. Look at the roof itself. We've got a 10-12 pitch. Should we be operating on a roof that steep? Now, granted, it's a 1.5-story house and it's not really that high up for a fall, but the reality is if we fall off that roof from that height and land in the driveway, we're going to have some significant injuries. With the amount of fire that's coming out of the side A side and the amount of smoke that's coming out of the rear on side C, do you think that the ventilation hole is actually going to provide enough adequate ventilation to save the house? We don't really have any extinguishment on the fire as of yet. The ventilation hole is actually going to draw the flames from side A through the building and actually to the ventilation hole quicker. It's going to speed up the flame travel throughout this building. The next hazard I see on side D is this electrical hazard. I've got a main power line that's coming in over the driveway to the service, which is directly correlated with about 3 or 4 feet from the flames. In a short amount of time, that wire is going to overheat and we're going to have an energized electrical hazard that's on the ground. Side D confirms that I don't have a bulkhead or a walkout basement, so I have to have consideration on what do I have for a void space below the first floor. And my last consideration on my RIT size up is as I make entry and come around all 4 sides of this building, I note that there's no cars in the driveway. We're putting an awful lot of firefighters at risk to potentially save something that doesn't have a life safety hazard. And if we look closely on the AD corner, we have heavy fire on the front porch. Did you note that the front porch actually doesn't have a full basement underneath it? It was an add-on and it's on columns. The amount of fire on the front porch is potentially going to cause that front porch to collapse and drop real early. In the beginning, I asked you to size up all 4 sides of this building. Most people pull up 3 or 4 things with a reactionary mindset. But after understanding the Progressive Rapid Intervention Team concept, most people be able to pull up over a dozen things that they saw with this same exact building fire. That mindset is going to make a difference at your next fire. So the Progressive RIT firefighter needs to understand that the transmission of a firefighter distress signal produces more stress and potential chaos than any other type of incident we ever may have encountered throughout our career. We must remember these 3 nuggets. Develop a plan, train everybody on that plan, and then implement the action plan so it works. Thank you for watching.